Hi, I'm Molly Turu. I am with Lenovo. I'm the Worldwide Education Marketing Manager, and I have Marta here with me, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Marta McAlister. I work on the Google for Education team, and my team is responsible for bringing products to market, and we also manage the sales enablement teams. So we train both our internal sales teams and also the partners worldwide.
Yeah, including Lenovo.
Including Lenovo.
Exactly. So first, Marta, I just wanted to ask you, because I think this is a challenge that maybe some schools get hung up on, is what data protections does Google have in place to protect students' privacy when using Google Gemini?
Gemini specifically, yeah. So I think there's a lot of myth and misunderstanding around, oh, do I have to pay for data protection? And that's not the case. So with any of our SKUs, whether you're using free Gemini with your Workspace for Education account, or if you decide to add a premium add-on like our Gemini SKUs, it is all data protected. So you have the free Gemini experience. You also have the apps and tools like Notebook LM that are powered by Gemini. All of those are data protected. You do get additional data protections under the Workspace agreement, and the paid SKUs just have additional admin functionality. But throughout all of these three options, the free and the two paid, it's all data protected. And what that means is when you're using something like Gemini, no human is reviewing that data, and we don't use that data to train a model.
Great. I think that at least for me, it makes me feel better about my kids using those kind of experiences. So
and my kids also use it, so same.
So great. I think, like, I always think about what are we going to use it for? What are the most common use cases that you're seeing for Gemini for Workspace? I'm thinking because there's more capability when you add on Workspace instead of just the cloud offering. That Google is seeing with teachers and administrators specifically?
Sure. So some of the most common ones are ones that we've actually scaffolded and made easier, which makes sense, right? Like if your average user is coming to a chatbot, it's kind of overwhelming to know how to get started. It's just this blank text box and you don't know what to put into it. And there's entire PDFs about prompt engineering to help you get started. So it can be quite overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons why we made more of a scaffolded experience in Gemini in Classroom specifically, where you can fill in the blank to say the grade that you teach, the subject that you're looking to create a lesson for, say. And it's more of the scaffold experience that then creates a lesson plan for you, as one example. So I would say some of the most common use cases are, again, the ones that we've sort of made a cheat sheet for, if you will. That said, we've seen a broad range of use cases that are quite impressive. Everything from teachers using it to create lessons to people using things like Notebook LM to have a rubric grader for their entire course. We've seen a lot of people using it integrated into things like Gmail for parent-teacher communication. So you imagine you have a bunch of reports or things about that particular student, and you can get an AI-generated summary to draft that first email or note to a parent, summarizing all of the work. Like my son who's in kindergarten, his teacher does all of this manually, which is very impressive to me. And every week she'll send me tons of photos of the week and recaps of everything he did. And all I can think is, gosh, imagine if she could just dump everything for each student and automatically generate that. And then she can put her personal, flair on top of that, of course, and customize it.
I think when we were talking previously, you said something about from some of the pilots that you've done with customers, it saves something like 13 hours of their time or something like that.
We were quite pleased to hear that. So a lot of our teams will do pilots because, teaching is an art and a science. We can think theoretically about what works well in our lovely desks at Google, but the rubber hits the road when you actually put it in a classroom and you see it in action. And so we run a ton of pilots on the technology, and our pilot teachers that were using Gemini integrated into Workspace tools saw an average of 13 hours saved per week. And we're obviously hoping that they can repurpose that saved time for more genuine connection and the things that are better off with humans doing. And so most of the time saved have been what we would call administrative burden tasks. And as a former educator myself, I can greatly imagine that would have saved me a lot of time on Sundays for things like lesson planning and grading in particular. And so, we were quite pleased to see those time savings.
Got your Sunday back, maybe. Could have gotten your Sunday
totally.
back.
Although I did like to sit in my cafe to do my lesson plans. It was a nice Zen moment for me, but could have done that reading a book.
Yes, exactly. Well, I guess one other thing, and I think I heard another speaker here at BETT talk about this a little bit on stage, but are you worried about students not learning anymore? Like, are we making it too, is the learning process becoming too easy that we deter the learning process? And also speak a little bit about learning science, because when we were talking, you were talking a bit about that.
Yeah, something I'm very passionate about. So just to set some context before I answer that directly, you know, Google for Education, our history is quite long. When we started back in 2006, the premise was really, hey, Google uses this infrastructure. It could be useful for businesses and schools. And then we got into the productivity space. Docs, Drive, Forms, all of that is what I would call learning agnostic. Those didn't have a pedagogical opinion to them. And it wasn't really until around COVID and the remote learning pandemic era that we were in, when we start to see a lot of learning loss. You know, we were like, we have this massive scale and now this massive responsibility to try to meet that moment. That is when we started to shift into what I would call learning opinionated tools. And once you start to have tools that are closer to teaching and learning, you really have to incorporate learning science into your design. And Google is a tech company, not an education company. And so we had to build that muscle and expertise. And so there are multiple layers where we've incorporated that to address that very fear that you opened your question with, which I share. The first is when we design features and products, we have this thing called the logic model process, which is X feature is designed for Y attitudinal, behavioral, or learning outcome, supported by Z learning science. So having more of that intentionality around, hey, you know, that feature that reminds students about where they are in the process, that supports metacognition. And we know from learning science research that metacognition helps students learn more. So that's one way that we've tried to infuse learning science into the product development process. The other, which is more recent in this Gen AI era, is through a model called LearnLM. So LearnLM is a purpose-built large language model based on Gemini, but fine-tuned with pedagogical and learning science principles, like supporting active learning and metacognition. I think we're all worried that we might turn into the blobs from WALL-E and lose all critical thought, but the point of LearnLM is we don't want to just give you the answer. We want to have that struggle, and so we call these things speed bumps or guardrails in the product that intentionally force the user to grapple before they get an answer. And I can tell you from first experience, I actually took a finance course last year and used the Learning Coach in Gemini, and it took me an hour before it would give me an answer. And mind you, the answer was actually wrong, funny enough, but that wasn't the point. I was learning a lot about what to look for in my assignment and types of things to call out. And that's just one example of how that shows up. And I will just add one more thing, which is we were actually doing that before the Gen AI boom, if you will, because I think it was something like 18%, or I can't remember the exact percentage of people who go to Google search came with a learning intention. And we don't, you know, the point of going to Google search for your average person is to get an answer. But that's not how you learn something. And so we were already adding those speed bumps, even in your regular Google search experience. And now we're continuing to elevate that with AI, because we are afraid that people are going to lose that struggle. And with learning, the effort is the point.
Yes, it was frustrating to me as a student going through math classes and computer science classes when they would make you do things the manual way and then they would teach you the quicker way, but I learned it is the reason why they did that. So
right, of course.
That's great. We're putting that science into the way that Gemini is working as well. So that's awesome to hear. Anything else you want to talk about today? I think that was our time. So I really appreciate your time today and talking about this. I know Lenovo and Google will continue to be great partners together with our devices and your software. We can do a lot together to help students and teachers.
Yeah,
so
thank you so much for your time. Lenovo.